Welcome to the very first meeting of the Berkeley History Club. Let's give ourselves a hand. All right. So I'm glad everybody could make it tonight. My name is Jeff Palmer, and about a year ago or so we thought, let's start a history club where people can come can come and talk about history and also be in a club. So it has like two purposes. One, to build community, the club. Two, talk about history, enjoy stuff about history. So hopefully you've come to the right room and the right event, because that's what we're going to talk about. Anyway, great to have everybody here. Just a couple announcements. Let's see. Sign up sheet. Oh, it'd be great if you feel like signing your, giving us your contact information if you want to hear about the next meeting. And I want to thank the Berkeley Fellowship of Unitarian Universalist for allowing us to use this room, no charge. So it's really nice. And I also want to thank Paul over there, who's doing awesome work on all this wires and stuff. I don't have no idea what it is, but he's doing something over there. And maybe you heard Brett play earlier, so thank you, Brett, too. All right, let's give those guys a hand. All right. So let's see, I think we did. Oh, this on Sunday. So just a little blurb about the church that meets here. They have no creed. They have visions and purposes and goals and things they believe in, but they don't have a creed. So they don't tell us what to believe. Actually, there's no there, right? So people come here. Some are atheists like myself, or agnostic. Some are like Christians, Buddhists, Hindus. We have a variety of people. Syncretists. There we go. If you're a syncretist, let me see your hand. I'm not quite sure, but the man in the hat. A little bit of everything. Yeah. So anyway, that's who we are. And if you ever would like to join in on Sunday mornings, we do a service here. And the last thing I want to say is I'm in a band, and we're going to play a dance here on September 28th. It's a Saturday. It's really fun, and it's going to be swing dance. So if you like swing dance music, you might see the same people at the dance that you see tonight here. All right, cool. So let's see. There's going to be two speakers today, and one of them is going to be Norm Gelbart. I hope I said your name right. Fantastic. All right. So he's going to talk. I'll let him say what he's going to be here in a minute, and he'll just start talking, okay? And then I'm going to be talking about the historical Jesus. I'm going to try to get to the point where we can talk about who is Jesus' natural father. It's a bit of a, it's going to take some time, so I don't know if I can get that far, but we'll see. We'll see how we go. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Norm Gelbart to come up and talk to us. He has a story to tell us. And while he's coming, if you would like to give like he's going to be giving like 5 or 10 minute talk. If you would like to do one of those, talk to me afterwards, because I would love to have here's some variety of stuff. So anyway, thank you very much. Norm.
Thank you. Let's see. Let's put this down here. Yeah, there you go. Microphones. I do love them. Awesome. Thanks, Jeff, for the invitation. The History Club. This is sort of an introduction on what it is that I know about what I know about. So I'll just try to do a little introduction to a book that my mom wrote, but actually she didn't do a really good job of writing it, so I was the editor that made it happen. Let's see how that story goes. It's a story called Usurped. It is, what the word means is, life is taken away, and her life was taken away in not death, but in every other sense of that word. So a little bit of an introduction and how that fits into the History Club. Let me see if I can just set this thing for myself. There we go. And I'll just try to read instead of improvising. Please forgive the reading, and thank you for coming and listening. So I will just read. My mom, her name is Ida Gelbart, and I put my name to be Ida. This is her night. Ida Gelbart. My name is Norm, and I'm her son. My mom, Ida Gelbart, survived 5 years of World War II in a German concentration camp. To be sure, it was a work camp, not a death camp, though many people did die there. With the world in its current, is this too loud, by the way? Yes. Not too loud. Okay, that's great. Yes, it's too loud. Is it? Okay, let me back off a little bit. No, don't back off. Okay. You'll do what you do. Thank you. With the world in its current state of strife, and with the recent horrific events in Israel, a country my parents almost settled in after World War II, my thoughts turned to my mom and to her memoir of growing up in Poland and her war years and her stories. She died in 2008, and I am so grateful that she didn't live to see Israel today. She would have been horrified and heartsick and in mourning for the Palestinian people. My mom was 14 in ninth grade when the Germans took her. She had no formal education beyond ninth grade and no facility to write a memoir, other than the passionate desire to share a very heartfelt and poignant and surprising set of stories. Full of humanity, these stories, full of soul and compassion. I edited her memoir and brought it to print as a tribute to the magnificent person that she was. Though the purpose of this, her autobiography, is to chronicle her experience, the purpose, as I see it more so, is to bring hope into this most fragile of times. For she had always brought hope to each and every person who entered her orbit. She brought hope by writing about the very human and personal side of a truly horrific experience, the human side that found caring and compassion in the poignant personal stories that she told, stories full of love and humor, despite being set during the most dire of circumstances. By the way, that's a little louder than I am up here, so any way to turn that volume down? 'Cause I hear it quite strong. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. Oh, is it a laptop? So I should be able to figure that out. Is it okay? Maybe you do it. Thanks, Paul. I don't want to mess things up. Thank you. Great. So thanks, Paul. Thank you very much. She brought, just to repeat a little bit, she brought hope by writing about the very human and personal side of a truly horrific experience, the human side that found caring and compassion in the poignant personal stories that she told, stories full of love, full of humor, despite being set during the most dire of circumstances. Her stories included, and they were about, 1, hunger and food, finding an unexpected food source in a camp vicinity, and her method of secreting the food into camp. 2, acts of kindness, a non-Jewish camp worker and his many acts of compassion and caring toward my mom and toward all the Jewish women concentration camp inmates. 3, the show, and I'll read you from that, putting on a vaudeville talent show in a concentration camp to provide entertainment for prisoners and guards alike as a way of improving relations with the camp staff and to help improve morale all around. 4, bringing relatives into incarceration, a surprising story about the effort to bring Jewish women into the camp, making them camp inmates in an attempt to save their lives. And 5, going home and going on. These are finally stories about returning home after her 5 years of being a concentration camp inmate. And here is an excerpt from her memoir. It is The Hungarian Women Inmates and the Show. How's the sound? Too loud to think okay? Great, thanks. So I'll read you a little bit about the Hungarian inmates and the show. And these are my mom's words. I'm just reading them. Returning from work one day, we were told that a transport of Hungarian women had arrived in camp. We later found out that these women were brought here from Auschwitz concentration camp, and therefore they were to be held in quarantine for a week. The women were housed in a hall across the stairway, and no one had access to them. The third day of the quarantine fell on a Sunday, and it was a sunny day. And after going through the counting procedure, the endless counting procedure, we were finally dismissed. Most of us lingered in the yard trying to soak up the sun and the fresh air. Across the yard, blaring radio music of popular Hitler-era marches could be heard coming from the camp commander's house. We were looking up toward the third floor windows where the Hungarian girls were quarantined. Each window consisted of a small glass pane, of small glass panes, and the Hungarians had their faces glued to each pane. We waved to them, and they waved back. We didn't dare try speaking with them since the camp commander and several SS women were also in the yard. Suddenly, a head appeared through one of the broken panes and burst into song. Several windows away, another head appeared in much the same manner and joined in the singing. You have to understand how unusual this could possibly have been in a concentration camp. The first woman had a gorgeous contralto voice, and the other a most beautiful soprano, both being operatic voices. They started with a Viennese waltz and continued with songs from popular opera and operetta. By contrast, the radio blared, "Soldaten sind Soldaten," soldiers are soldiers. And yet the women continued to sing. The Germans stood dumbfounded. I guess they thought the girls could not outsing the blaring radio. To their amazement, the live concert they were hearing was so exquisite that they soon turned off the radio to listen to the potpourri of songs coming from the windows above. Encouraged by our constant applause, the concert lasted about an hour. Finally, tired, the girls withdrew their heads, the Germans stood smiling, and we were in a state of euphoria. For one infinitesimal moment, we had forgotten our plight, our humiliation. We were the victors, not the vanquished. The quarantine period must have seemed as endless to the Hungarians as it did to us. We were anxious to learn about them and about the place from which they had come. Finally, at the end of the week, the doors opened and we were allowed to mingle. Our first impression was of horror and shock at the appalling stares with which we were met. All their heads were shaven. Many had sores on their heads. Their eyes wore an incoherent expression. As we began talking and questioning one another, we soon realized that these women had come straight out of a true hell. In some, a blaze of horror could still be seen in their bloodshot eyes. They and their families had been taken from their homes and businesses, herded into one place, and loaded into cattle cars that brought them into Auschwitz. There, they went through a selection process which separated these people from their families, who were immediately sent to the gas chambers. They, in turn, had spent months in Auschwitz, satisfying a diabolical, animalistic need in the Germans who ran the camp. These women were single-mindedly made to stand hours, even days, exposed to all the elements, hour after hour, day after day. They stood in a field, exposed to both the burning sun, which blistered their bodies and their shaved heads, and the pouring rain. Around them were people dying from starvation, exhaustion. The nauseating, sweet-smelling smoke of burning bodies billowed from the tall chimneys of the crematoria and filled the air. The gas chambers and the crematoria were in full operation, and the threat of being the next to be led along the path of death was ever present. Unbelievably and remarkably, after this prolonged period of torture, They were granted a last-second reprieve and were put on a train and brought to us. Now, I could stop here or finish this story. Entirely up to you. Sure, yeah, I have more. A bit more of how this goes. I'm sorry? I'm sorry. Would you like me to stop? You have to tell me. Okay, she was saying it's a bit much for her. I see. Well, it's going to change right now. No more crematoria. So to contrast that, vivid memories of the quarantine and the subsequently very moving concert by the original two women, Lily and Magda, prompted us often to beseech them to sing for us. At bedtime, we would open the doors leading from hall to hall with everyone in bed and the lights out, and their singing would begin. A stillness pervaded through which only their voices could be heard, performing popular classics. When the songs came to an end, either quietly or in a crescendo, some people had been lulled to sleep, some sobbed quietly, and others just lay enjoying the beauty of those voices. So, an idea. With the help of the Hungarian women, we decided to produce a show, hoping that this would give us a lift. We petitioned the camp commander for permission, which I imagine, due to her own curiosity, she granted us. Several women were chosen to direct the show, and they immediately began scouting for talent. Naturally, our singers, Lily and Magda, were selected. Among the Hungarians, they found a woman who had been a ballerina and persuaded her to take charge of the choreography. We met to determine the program for the show. It consisted of musical selections, recitations, skits, and classics, as well as acrobatic dancing. And my mom says, I was given a small solo appearance of imitating a trumpeting announcer. On weekends, we rehearsed with a fervor befitting professional performers, and we always had an audience. They jested at the way we performed. Some even scolded us for indulging in such frivolities, but nothing could deter us from our goal. After many weeks of rehearsing, we were finally ready. The show took place on a Sunday. We cleared the middle of the hall, brought in several long tables, put them together to form a stage. We rigged a curtain made from blankets, which we hung from a rope. Rows of chairs and benches were set up in front of the stage. The hall filled with women. Those who could not find a chair sat on the floor. When the time came for curtain call, even the camp commander and the SS women had arrived to take up places in the doorway. The show progressed beautifully with the musical selections as the highlight. The recitations were poignant, and the skits were funny. The dancers were clumsy, with the exception of one athletically inclined girl who executed several somersaults, headstands, and fancy handstands. This is my mom's words. We poked fun at our kitchen staff and even dared to express sarcasm in this parody of the camp commander. The parody is, she dresses us in the latest fashion, which is why we are so elegantly attired. This drew gales of laughter even from the Germans. The show was a great success, at least because we had taken the initiative to do something extraordinary, something unprecedented in our camp. It pulled us out of our rut for a short while, giving us a lift and the strength to go on. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Jeff. I hope that wasn't too much or too hard. No, it doesn't.
Roger?
I hear it now. Sounds like it's on.
I just wondered what year it was. I was wondering whether this was towards the end of the war when the Germans knew they were losing, or
Sorry. She was taken in 1939. So she was there in that camp for 5-6 years, and from one camp to the next. Oh, the performance near the end, I would say. Very much near the end. So 1943, 44, something like that. Not 45. That was a rough year. Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions? I was wondering what determined whether someone went to a death camp or went to a work camp?
He asks what determined death camp versus work camp, and I don't know that I can answer that question. I certainly don't know the details of it. When she was taken, they were far removed from Auschwitz, where she lived. Plus, they needed people to work. They really needed people to work, so they were looking for as much labor as they could get. So that was kind of the determination for her. Yes, exactly. Right.
Anyone else? Okay. So, yes.
Thank you.
Then, so they evidently were fed well and everything? I mean, how could they have the strength otherwise?
There are many stories in here about being fed. They were not fed well, by any stretch. Being fed was difficult, or let's put it this way, you had to plan. I wasn't there, but reading her stories, you had to plan in advance to have enough food to make it from day to day to day. You could never eat all that you were given. If you did, you wouldn't make it. So people learned how to save food in order to be able to survive. They never had enough food, according to the stories that she told.
Anyone else? Okay, great.
So she tells very humorous stories about foraging for food.
Well, let's give Norm a big hand. You guys.
Thank you. Sorry if it was hard.
So right now, for a couple minutes, what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, we set up the tables in such a way that if the people on this side of the table wouldn't mind like turning around. Thank you, Virginia. If the people on this side of the table wouldn't mind turning around, introducing themselves to the people behind them, and maybe if you guys want to chat for a couple of minutes about anything you like, and we'll be ready. We'll about 5 minutes or less. We'll start on the next conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, are we all ready to go? Okay, are we all ready? Should never try to interrupt people who are having a nice conversation. So afterwards, if people want to give me feedback and tell me how to do this thing better, I'd love to hear it because this is the first time we tried it. The hardest part is knowing when to interrupt people and ask them to quit talking. So anyway, great. Okay. So let's see. My name is Jeff Palmer, and I'll just do a quick review because some people came in afterwards. Let's see, Jeff Palmer, and been a plumber, school teacher, missionary. Been a Christian, been an atheist, agnostic, all kinds of things. Unitarian now, I guess. So we're at a Unitarian church, which has allowed us to use the building for free, which is so nice. If you want to join us for services, we do them on Sunday mornings. We'd love to see you. Let's see, what else? I've been studying the historical Jesus for 33 years. I was a Christian, and I decided I wanted to study the Christian religion from a secular viewpoint and see what I would discover. Reading the first book, I decided to give up the whole Christian faith. So I don't recommend it to anybody. I loved being a Christian. And so, yeah, I don't recommend not leaving that faith because I loved being a Christian. But I have left it, and so that's what that is. Let's see. So I've been studying the historical Jesus for 33 years of the last 37. And it's been so fascinating, right? It's not just, I don't just sit down and read a book or something like that. Like when I'm walking, I'm calculating stuff in my head. What I've done is kind of different than most people. As a matter of fact, I think just about anybody. I kind of tried to add math to the history. So this is what's going to be different tonight. Stephen Hawking was writing a book, and he turned it into his publishers. Well, he was working with the publishers to create the book, and they said, if you add one mathematical equation in that book, we're going to lose half our audience. If you add two, we're going to lose the other half. So my goal is to have an interesting meeting, but don't have math in there, which is like, so anyway, tell me how I do at the end if you haven't left early. Okay, Medea, take care. Have a good evening. So the 33 years, I've read pretty much every book in the 4 public libraries in Berkeley. I read my 300 books, just about all of those, on the historical Jesus. Countless articles, countless discussions on Facebook, on the internet, one after the other, and only one added math to history. Just one topic. I couldn't believe it. So, and math has a formula that tells us what happened. Like just for example, let's do a little experimentation here. So I got 2 dice here. I'm going to try to hit a 5. 5 is my favorite number, okay? I'm not going to look, okay? So I have no idea what I got, and I covered it up. Yeah, it's covered up. Now, let's say we wanted to figure out what happened, right? This is the past. We want to figure out what happened. So we could apply a formula. We could apply the formula that's right over there. The odds of something that happened is equal to the rate at which it happens times the attempts. So the easy part is the attempts. I tried 2 dice. That would be 2 attempts. I haven't done this since, 10 years ago when I was a school teacher. This is kind of fun. So you got, unfortunately, I didn't really do the planning very well. I got two things written on top of each other. 2 attempts. The rate at which you can get a 5 off of a dice is 1 over. So the odds that there is a 5 underneath this piece of paper is equal to 2 over 6, right? Or 1/3, 33%. So should we check it out, see what we got, just for fun? Nope. But 1 plus 4 is 5, so we got that. But anyway, so you can use this formula to find out what happened in the past. So it's wild. Let's see. The Talpiot tomb, the one subject where I said that the historians and the mathematicians got together was in this discussion about the Talpiot tomb. Paul, can we pull up the first picture on the Talpiot tomb? 1980, March 27th, 1980 at 4 o'clock, a construction company was working in East Jerusalem in the neighborhood of Talpiot. They were using explosives. They wanted to build a foundation and put an apartment building on top. They were using explosives, and at 4 o'clock, that showed up. So it's an ancient tomb, right? That's all they knew. So the law was you had to stop all work, bring in the experts. They have to investigate it, and then before they do any more work. They looked at there were ossuaries inside the tomb, the bone boxes. Usually you only get about 20% of the bone boxes have actually a name inscribed on them. In this case, you got 60%. There were 10 ossuaries found inside, with 6 of them had names on them, and these are the names that were on there. So yeah, I'm still good, right, Paul? No. Testing? Testing? That's all right. He's going to get it in a second. Testing, 1, 2, yeah, nice. All right. That guy can do anything. Okay. So we got, these are the names on the bone boxes that were in that tomb. Mary, Jesus, son of Joseph, Joseph, Matthew. On one ossuary it said Mary and Martha, and on one it said Judas, son of Jesus. Now, if you look up in the Gospels, the names of Jesus' family is Mary and Joseph, and he had 5 brothers. There's Jesus, James, Joseph, Judas, Simon. So the first thought that you think, right? Wow, could this be the same family, right? Because if it is, we have learned a lot, right? Because if this is the Jesus family, well, we know that Jesus got married because he has a son. And we know he had a son, right? It could be a different Jesus. There were actually, I think, 3 times where they found a Jesus, son of Joseph, in these different tombs. So it could be a different one. But if they are the same one, then we will learn a lot about the historical Jesus. So what the statisticians did, they looked at a lexicon like this. It might have been the exact edition. This is Tal Ilan's lexicon. It's a list of names that were found in the Palestine area over a 530-year period, ending around the year 200 CE. So the cool thing about this, with this, you can get the rate, the name frequencies of all these people. It's in here, right? You can get that. And then the attempts, if you know, like, let's say, the group of people that followed Jesus was about 30. If you count the family, the disciples, different people here and there, the people he healed, Nicodemus, all those kind of people, if you add up all those names, there's about 30 named individuals. Now, I'm not saying there weren't more, right? The New Testament said there were like thousands, whatever, would come and see him speak. But I'm just talking about the named individuals. So with 30, you can use this information from this lexicon, because you know the rate you get out of this book, and knowing 30 is about the amount of people that followed the named individuals that had some kind of connection with Jesus, and then you could find out all kinds of stuff. But the only people who have used this were the statisticians, which they tried to figure out if this tomb was filled with the family of Jesus. So we'll talk a little bit more about what the results were. It all boils down to which names they pick. If they used, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those 7 names, then for sure it's like 99% chance that these are the same people. Most scholars won't use Matthew. They won't use this one. And this one they like to change and make that Joseph. And so most scholars will say, like Kitty and Elliott, they wrote a paper on this. It's like way less than 99%. It's like the most was like 47% or 3%, depending on what exact names they use. So we'll talk about that, and we'll try to figure out if this group of people are these people. We're going to center the question on Matthew. Because Matthew, if you include Matthew, you have enough names to make it a really strong case. With Matthew, the case is either 83% chance that they're the same people, or it's 99.6% chance that they're the same people. So it's all about, to me, the easy one to go after is Matthew. So when I saw Matthew up there, I had to say, okay, I have to learn everything there is about Matthew. So if you look up in Mark, you find the first story about Jesus calling the tax collector to become a disciple. And the tax collector, so that story has 3 parts to it. It's the story of the tax collector. Before that is the story of Jesus healing a paralyzed man. And after that is the story of fasting and what Jesus taught about fasting. So there's a 3-part section of Mark that includes the story of the tax collector. Now, in Mark, the tax collector's name is Levi, son of Alphaeus. Excuse me. So Matthew, what Matthew did, Matthew was written after Mark. Matthew took large sections of Mark and stuck it in his book. It was cut and paste job, changing very little of the words, including this section. So he took those 3 stories. He took the healing of the paralyzed man, the calling of the tax collector, and the story about fasting, which is quite a few verses. He pasted it into his book, changing pretty much only one thing, the name of the tax collector. So the name of the tax collector becomes Matthew. So this is important to know because we realize the first tax collector is called Levi, son of Alphaeus. And so since these are the same stories, the only thing changed was the person's name. So almost every scholar thinks that Levi, son of Alphaeus, is Matthew, because that's the only thing that was changed. And that's important to know, because now we know Matthew's father's name, Alphaeus. Okay? So with that piece of evidence, that is like the first piece of evidence that gets us closer to finding out if these are the same people, and we march down this path. It's like one brick after the other brick, and you could build an edifice. If one brick is like weak or doesn't work or just illogical, then it's kind of hard to make the whole thing work. So anyway, that's what that is. So let's see, where am I? So you can take this formula and solve a problem that scholars have been fighting over for decades. They're trying to figure out, was Peter the same guy as Cephas? So Peter is a Greek name that means rock. And of course, every scholar would say Jesus did not speak Greek with his disciples. They spoke Aramaic. But the people who wrote the New Testament, they took the stories in Aramaic, they translated them into Greek and wrote them down in Greek, and we have them in Greek. So every scholar would say when Jesus was talking to Simon, and when he said, supposedly, that he said, "You are Simon, you are the rock, upon this rock I will build my church." What he said was, "You are Cephas. On this Cephas I will build my church." So that was his name in Aramaic. So scholars will say, for sure, these are the same people, because the name means exactly the same thing. But other people say no. But what we can do, just taking this formula here, we can figure out what the odds are that you could have 2 guys with the names that mean exactly the same thing in a small group of 30 people. So you take your 30 people, it's not written up there. "30 people being the number of people that follow Jesus. You take the 30 people times the rate at which Peter and Cephas show up. So Peter and Cephas, pulling it out of this book, you get this rate. I apologize, this is crazy. I've never done this in 4 years of teaching. Anyway, I'm rusty. So it's 2509. So that's the rate. If you added all the Peters and all the Cephases in the New Testament together, you would get the number 5. And 2509 is 2,509. That's the total names of all the valid male names in this book. So if you multiply those two together, you find out the odds that you could have the second guy, right? For sure there's one. For sure there's a Peter, right? But is there also a Cephas? Or are they the same person? So doing this, you do the math here, and it's 99.4% chance that they are the same person. 0.6% chance they're two different people. So now, next time you talk to some scholars, when you hear them arguing whether they're the same person, you say, you know what? Math will not tell us the answer. It won't. But it will tell us the odds. And to me, the odds, like history, is about odds. It's everything in the past. You can't really prove anything. It's all about odds. And so the odds that they are the same person, 99.4% that they are the same person. So going forward, let's talk about Alphaeus. So Alphaeus his name only comes up twice. And so the question is, are we talking about two guys or one guy? And it's the same problem again, right? So the chance that it's only one guy is 99.6% chance that there's only one guy. Now, you notice I'm not boring you with doing all the math. I'm trying to avoid that. So the chance that there's one guy. Now, the reason this is important is because now we know, see, Matthew's father was Alphaeus. Remember, we talked about that earlier. James, one of the apostles, his father was Alphaeus. So if two of the apostles have the same father for a name, those two guys are brothers. And if they are brothers, then you'd expect them to be buried in the same tomb. There's a couple other names. There's Clopas and Cleopas. Now, if you look in the King James Bible that I have at my house, the version I have, it's the old King James. And they say that Clopas and Cleopas are the same guy. Right? A lot of scholars think they are, but the name's two different names. They don't mean the same thing at all. But if you notice, one is a transliteration of the other. So if you wrote Cleopas, the Greek name, and you wanted to translate that if you wanted to write something in Aramaic, you wouldn't write Cleopas because that's the Greek version. You would write Clopas. So the question about whether or not they're the same person is 91% that they are the same person. And you're probably thinking, what does all this mean? We're getting there because we're trying to see if this Matthew guy is Jesus' brother, right? So Alphaeus and Clopas. Let's talk about the names Alphaeus and Clopas. Alphaeus and Clopas, some philologists say is the same name. And it comes from the name Halep. I'm probably pronouncing it the wrong way. And it means, it means traverse, exchange, change. Okay? And the reason they have two names for one name, one source, is because parts of the country pronounce Halep like Halep. Other parts of the country pronounce it like Kolop, like that. That guttural thing. Thank you, Mark. Anyway, so Halep, the soft H, well, in English it's H, okay? The soft first letter becomes Alphaeus when they wrote it in Greek. The Kolop becomes Clopas or Clopas when they wrote that in Greek. So the philologists say they're the same name. It's just a matter of what part of the country was saying the story. So I tried to do the math on that. Now this one's tricky because you got to be careful you don't do circular thinking, you know. So what I did was I just counted both names as rare names. And I saw what's the chance of having two rare names in this group of 30 people. Luckily for us that the names are so rare that the chance that it's 88% chance that these guys are the same person based only on the fact that they have rare names, not using the philologist's argument that they are actually the same name. So it looks like those two guys are the same. This leads us to a thing that might be a little scandalous to some. There's three disciples. The last disciple in the list of disciples is Judas Iscariot, always listed last. The first disciple in the list of disciples is Peter, there you go. Always listed first, right? They seem to list the most important, the best disciples first, and as they went down the list, put the worst ones at the bottom. That's what they say. Okay. So after Judas Iscariot is the last guy listed. But the three before him were James, son of Alphaeus, Judas, and Simon. So if you look at Jesus' brothers, you got James, Judas, Simon. Exact same order, exact same names. Right? If you didn't know that Jesus had a brother named Joseph, you would say, dang, those names match exactly. Right? So what are the odds that in a group of about 30 guys, you'd have two sets of people's names, that these two sets of names twice? Right? What's the odds? The odds that they say it this way. The odds that they are just one person is 99.6% chance. I'm sorry, that they are the same people. It's not two different people. It's just one group. That odds is 99.6% chance. So that tells us that the take care. Good night. That's okay. All right. So it tells us that Jesus' actual brothers were his disciples in his disciple group. Now, how many people have an objection to that? Because I actually have one. Anybody else have an objection to that? Just me. Okay. So the reason I object to it is because the Bible clearly says about two places that his brothers did not believe in Jesus' message. So how could they be disciples if they don't believe, right? So my answer to that is you can't believe everything it says that's in the Bible, right? And there's a reason that could have been written in there. Paul was an apostle, and he was in this big fight with the Jesus family. The Jesus family ran the church in Jerusalem, and Paul was trying to get his thing going and started to start churches here and there, and he had to come underneath their leadership, and he was in this big fight with them. And when he wrote the letter to the Galatians, he wrote this. He said, "Those guys love circumcision so much, I wish the next time they do circumcision, the knife will slip and cut the whole thing off." I mean that's in the New Testament, right? So there's that kind of hatred and anger towards another group, towards this family, right? This guy, Paul was talking about this guy, James, who took over the church after Jesus died. So he's talking about that guy and probably some of his brothers. So we look at that and we say and then the people who followed Paul were the ones who wrote the Bible, right? You can't find, except maybe the book of James, you can't find anything in the New Testament that's written by anybody except for the followers of Paul. So it's like working through this material is kind of tough. So it looks like they had reason to that there's a reason that it says that his brothers did not believe him. So Mary, this being true, that if these three people, James, Judas, and Simon, are disciples, okay, and the other, let's see, Mary must have at some point in her life been married to a man that was called Alphaeus, right? Because one of the disciples, I wish I had it up there, one of the disciples named James, son of Alphaeus. But the New Testament says Jesus married Joseph. So what did he do? Divorce this Joseph, marry the Alphaeus guy? Or did Joseph die, early? So what happened? What's the story behind that? So it could be that Joseph died. A lot of scholars think Joseph died when Jesus was very young. That could be, right? Another option. They got divorced, but that's like very rare. The chance of some poor family getting divorced is practically zero. So the third option is that Joseph sometimes went by the name Joseph, and sometimes he went by the name Alphaeus. He had two names. Like Matthew and Levi, who had two names. Matthew, Levi, two names. Clopas, Cleopas, two names. So who else? Simon, Cephas, and Peter, three names for the same guy. So it wasn't a surprise. Like Thomas, right? Thomas wasn't even a name. Thomas' name means twin. It wasn't even a name back then. So his real name was Judas. So he had two names, Judas and Thomas. And then there was Thaddeus, whose other name was Judas. So you got guys, it seemed like half the people had two names. So it's no big deal that Joseph could have had a second name, Alphaeus. And that would explain how James, son of Alphaeus, could be Mary's son. So now let's look at the odds of, let's think about Talpiot tomb. Earlier we talked about that. What are the odds that this group of people is the same as this group of people? Now I can include Matthew, because Matthew, his father was Alphaeus, and Mary was married to a guy named Alphaeus that sometimes took the name Alphaeus. So Matthew was a son or stepson of Mary, and you'd expect them to be in the same tomb. So now, this is like brick by brick. See, this is how we're building this story. First brick, second brick. We're I think on the third brick now. So we're building it brick by brick. So if you do the math with these 5 names, Mary, Jesus, Joseph, and Matthew, you get either 83% chance that these are the same people, and this is Jesus' tomb, or 99.6% or 4% chance that they are. It all depends on how you handle this name. This name is very rare. Bart Ehrman wrote about this, and he said, this isn't Jesus' tomb because the names are common. Well, someone should tell Bart Ehrman that name is not common. It's in there, and it's very rare. Okay, so anyway, but Bart Ehrman's a great guy. He's genius, and I love the guy. But anyway, that's my own opinion about the thing. So this is the same family, and now that we see that this is the same family, we know that Jesus had a son named Judas, and that he was married. So who was he married to? So there's Mary and Martha. The women went to the husband's tomb and the husband's house. So when you find a woman inside a tomb, you would expect that woman to be married to somebody in that tomb. Now there are 4 ossuaries that we don't know the names of. So Mary and Martha, or both, no, not both. One of them could have married to anybody that's not on this list, right? Martha could be married to Matthew, Mary could be Joseph, whoever. I mean, you can't tell who married whom. But these 2 people married, one of them probably at least married somebody on this list. So that brings up the question about Mary right here. A few people think Mary and Martha, the ones, let me backtrack a second, sorry. I want to see this Mary and Martha. If you remember your story about Jesus, there was a Mary and Martha in the New Testament. So you're wondering, is the Mary and Martha in the New Testament the same as this Mary and Martha? Right? You use the same formula, right? You use the same formula. You have, of the single women, see, these had to be single women to get into this tomb. They had to be single, they married somebody, now they're no longer single, now they're in the tomb. So they had to be single, at some point in their life, right? So when they were single, there's only 6 women at the most that are in the New Testament that were single. That's their names that we have names of. Okay, so we have Mary and Martha that are in this tomb that we have already shown that this is Jesus' tomb. Then we have Mary and Martha in the New Testament. Then we have Mary Magdalene. And I think there's a woman named Susanna, which her husband's name might not have been mentioned at all. So there's 6 at the most. So when you do the math on this, you see this number would change to 6. This rate is 317, so it's going to be like 6 over 317. When you do the math, to find out the odds that you could have a second group of Mary and Martha, or let me put it this way, the odds that they are the same person. When you do the math on that, you get 88%. So 88% chance that this Mary and Martha are the actual Mary and Martha listed in the book of John. Let's see, where are we at? Talpiot tomb. So I have to tell you about a really smart guy named Christopher Lawson. Christopher Lawson, he might be listening right now. He studied he's a scholar, and he studied Dead Sea Scrolls. And he told me one day that he thinks Judas of Galilee is Jesus' father. And I was blown away. I was like, Judas of Galilee? Yeah, right, Because Judas of Galilee is like the #1 hero of the books of Josephus. If you want to read about like the #1 hero in that book, you read about Judas of Galilee, so many people do this, right? They take somebody that's unknown like Jesus, and you match him with like a really popular, famous guy. And so to me, I was just rolling my eyes. But I decided to study it, so I just studied everything I could about this guy, Judas of Galilee. So, as it turns out, Judas of Galilee was a fugitive from the law and had several names to try to survive. How many people used to ever watch The Fugitive when you were a kid? Yeah, I used to love that show. Now, I will ask you, because I forget. When the guy, whatever his name was, when he went from town to town, did he always change his name? Anybody remember? Okay, so to me, he definitely could not use his original name, Dr. whatever it was. He couldn't use his original name because the police could chase him. So he had to have, Thank you. All right. You should come to one of my meetings. So he had to change his name at least once to stay ahead of the law, right? So this Judas of Galilee guy changed his name all the time. He's listed as Judas, son of Sepphoris, Judas of Galilee, Judas, son of Gamala. And then there's a whole bunch of names in the Jesus story that we'll get into in the future. But I want to talk about the name that comes up first in Josephus' writings about this guy. Okay, so the first name that we find in Josephus is called Judas, son of Sepphoris. So Sepphoris was a town about 4 miles from Nazareth, about 45 minutes, well, whatever it was, might have been 3 miles. Anyway, a few miles from Nazareth, you could just walk there. Nazareth was a little hamlet. Several people say it didn't even exist, but that's another story. But it's a little hamlet, and Sepphoris was the capital of the whole province. Okay? The guy's name, so this guy, Judas, son of Sepphoris, what he does, he becomes a rabbi and goes to Jerusalem for his job, and he's working there, and he and his partner, Matthew, are so famous that people come from, according to Josephus, who's prone to exaggerate, they come from all over the country to hear him speak, to hear those guys speak. So one day, the students are sitting there in the class, and a stir happens. There's all this buzz. And it turns out they heard that King Herod was sick and about to die. And so Judas, son of Sepphoris, makes a speech. And back then they would put speeches in the mouths of their speakers. The writers would do that. And so when you hear a speech coming out of a particular person, you're like, yeah, right. Maybe he said it, maybe he didn't. But it's all we have. So that's all I can share. So, but just to give you the caveat, it could very well have been made up completely. But this is the speech that Josephus said that Judas, son of Sepphoris, told his students. He said that there was this eagle, a golden eagle, that was on the main entrance to the temple, mounted up above the main entrance. That was totally sacrilegious to the Jews, the Judeans of that time. You cannot have any graven image in the whole country. And here Herod had put a golden eagle up on the main entrance to the temple. I'm sure those Jews really, really hated that. They wanted to serve God. They wanted to have their own kingdom, free of Roman control. In their mind, I'm thinking, they could not do that when they had golden images all over the place, especially on the temple. So his students there was a stir amongst the students. They wanted to do something, and he said, let's tear it down. Let's tear it down. He said, sorry, sometimes I get emotional when I think about this stuff. He said, it might cost us your life, but your legacy will live on. And everyone dies eventually. You're going to get sick. You're going to die. Some will die before others. You're going to die eventually. It might cost you, but God might do something. So let's tear it down. So he and Matthew encouraged the students. They went out there at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. It was midday. 12 o'clock now, I don't know how to say that, noon, 12 o'clock noon, midday, they went up there with hatchets and ropes. They got themselves up there. They started hacking away at the golden eagle. The golden eagle falls down. Somebody reports it to the temple security. He rushes out there to see what's going on. He probably can't believe his eyes. I mean, this is total insurrection right in front of everybody. They bring out the troops. They start arresting people, grabbing people. Matthew got caught. burned at the stake. About 40 students got caught. Some of them probably burned at the stake. The ones who went up were actually on, the building and were caught up there. The other students were just mercifully just killed, right? So, but the story from Josephus is kind of complicated. Josephus has two main writings that take care of this period. In one, he said Judas got caught. Judas, son of Sephras, was caught also burned at the stake. In the other one, he doesn't say that. So there's a slight question, maybe Judas escaped, right? So now, let me describe to you what Josephus says about this guy, Judas, son of Sephras. He said he was a rabbi, smart. I don't think anyone else in all of Josephus, and maybe in the whole New Testament, was described as being smart, intelligent. They called him a sophist, like clever, right? He was clever. So he was a rabbi, clever. He worked with youth. He had a partner. Let's see. His name was Judas. Right? He had this name. It was a toponym. It was a name which has a location as part of it. I never heard anybody say the words. I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, his name had a location as part of his name, right? So he had that. His MO was the following. He would hear news and then attack something and destroy it. Okay? So that was Judas, son of Sephras. So we don't know if he got killed and burned to the stake with his buddy, Matthew, or if he escaped. But later on, 10 years later, Judas of Galilee appears in the scene. Now listen to what Josephus says about Judas of Galilee. He was a rabbi. He was smart. He worked with youth. His name was Judas. His name had a location in it. He had a partner. I don't know if I covered that one. His MO was when he got news, attack something of value to the Romans. Everything exactly the same. So it looks like they survived. Now you could do the math on that. I've done it. The chance that there's two people with all these same things, like two separate guys, they're not the same person, is like basically zero. It's like 99.99% that they are the same person, right? A lot of scholars actually believe this. This is one of the times when scholars will actually agree with me. So there's about half the scholars I think agree on this position. So that's the guy. So he appears again on the scene. But what happened to him between the time when he escaped from Jerusalem? So if he came back, if he appeared on the scene again, that means he lived, right? He survived the attack of the Golden Eagle. So what happened to him between the time when he ran out of the city with a whole bunch of students? They were desperate, right? He ran out. We don't know if they stuck together, whatever. And then what happened for the next 10 years? So we could probably assume he went to Sephras. His name was son of Sephras. So we probably assume he went there, right? If you're a fugitive, put yourself in his shoes. You're a fugitive. Your partner's just been burned at the stake. You know that's what you're looking forward to if you get caught. What you going to do first? In my mind, what you do first is you go home and get as much money, as much help as you can, and go hide your family and your children, because when your name was going to give you away, the Romans know where to look for you, right? They're just going to go to Sephras. They know you came from Sephras. They'll go there, and they'll ask around until they find your family, and then they're going to take them hostage. You'll hear, there's other stories about them doing stuff like this. They take people hostage, and then they say, give up Judas, or we're going to do, what we want with your family. So he had to go, in my mind, what he did was, he went to Sephras and to get help and go hide his family, at least, right? So, but Josephus doesn't say that. But Josephus says that a guy, right after Judas, son of Sephras, escapes from Jerusalem, right after that, a guy appears in Sephras with desperate men. His name was Judas. Judas, son of Hezekiah. Now, if you were the son of Hezekiah, you would never tell anybody. That would be the last thing you would tell them your name, son of Hezekiah. Hezekiah was a guerrilla fighter. He died in the year 48 BCE. He was up in Caesarea area on the outskirts, killed by Herod before Herod was the king. And Herod killed him in an immoral way, cut off his head. He was supposed to put him on trial. He didn't. There was a national protest over this, according to Josephus, who likes to exaggerate. So, according to Josephus, there was a national protest, and and then there was a rebellion. Herod might have lost his job right then. There was so much anger towards him, but he brought in his soldiers at the court, because they put Herod on trial. And Herod brought his soldiers into the court and basically used force to take over everything and survive politically. So, yeah. Oh, thanks. Oh, thank you. So, was this guy Judas, son of Hezekiah? Was this the same guy as Judas, son of Sepphoris? Right? Now, one thing is, Judas, son of Sepphoris, you're calling yourself, it's like you're calling yourself Judas, son of Oakland. Right? Now, why would you do that? To me, you only do that because you either don't know your father's name or you don't want to tell anybody your father's name. Right? That's the only reason you do that. So it makes sense if your father was Hezekiah. You cannot tell anybody that's your father. Right? So it makes sense. So this guy, Judas of Hezekiah, arrives in Sepphoris right after the rebellion in Jerusalem. He arrives there with desperate men, and the news hits. The news is Herod has actually died. Then he takes his desperate men, and they fight with the other men of the town. There's like a rebellion breaks out in the town. There's different factions. There were two things to go after if you were one of those men at that time. You wanted the palace, or you wanted the armory. The palace for the money, the army for the weapons. Now, I don't know. Well, let me put it this way. Judas, son of Hezekiah, ends up with the weapons. So I think he ignored the palace, took his desperate men, and went after the armory, got weapons, because Josephus says he got weapons, was like cruel with the rest of the protesters, rebels, and put him, and then armed them. So he took over by force the rest of the group and armed them. So it looks like these are the same guy again. That this guy Hezekiah is the actual Judas, son of Hezekiah, is Judas, son of Sepphoris. It looks like the same guy. And you can do the math, and it'll show that if you do the math on that. So the importance of knowing this is because now we know that Judas, son of Sepphoris, when he arrived in Sepphoris or Nazareth. Remember, Nazareth is just a few miles to the south. Right? In those days, you had capitals and large towns, and then you had these tiny little hamlets, little villages around. I spent 4 years in Haiti. It's just like that in Haiti. You have, there's the big town, right, where you go to market on Saturdays. You could buy whatever you want laid out there on the ground or on tables, and it's all there, pretty much whatever you want. So you could buy it, right, if you have money. On the little hamlets and stuff, they would have, from myself to Margaret, that was the marketplace, maybe on Tuesdays. It was this much stuff. From myself to Margaret, this spread out. You'd have maybe some matches tied up in a little string. You could buy 6 matches. Anyway, that's what Haiti was like in about 1985 when I was there. So it was the same thing. You had tiny little hamlets surrounding large capital towns. So if you were somebody that lived in these little hamlets, you would walk to your main capital for everything. You got to see a doctor. You got to get a job. You got to go do some legal stuff. All that stuff, you go to the main town, get it done there, come back, sleep at your house. So that's what it was like back then. And it looks like that the family of Jesus is related somehow to this family of Judas. Because if you think about it, we have, they're both from the Sepphoris Nazareth area, okay? The Sepphoris Nazareth area, the population was about 1% of the whole country. Right? They're both from that area. They both had the same 3 names. They both had the 3 names that were the same in both families. You had Judas, James, Simon. Okay, so let me see. let's see, one of them is 10%, one is 7%, 7 over 100, and the other one is probably like 2 over 100. Anyway, so there was that they had in common. Both groups had a cleansing of the temple, right? Like Jesus had a cleansing of the temple, right? He took the whip, now, this is according to the New Testament, right? I'm not so much saying what's true, I'm saying what's in the New Testament, right? According to the New Testament, Jesus had what everyone calls the cleansing of the temple. He took the whip, he knocked over the tables full of money, and so that's called cleansing of the temple. Judas himself, son of Sept, also had a cleansing of the temple, knocking down the golden eagle. I mean, that's cleansing of the temple too. They both had a triumphant processional into Jerusalem. Jesus, you already know about that one, right? Jesus shows up to town, he gets the donkey, he sits on the donkey, and they got the people with the palm leaves on Palm Sunday, and they're waving it and say, hey, this is great, the Messiah is here, the son of David, that means he's the Messiah. It's great, the Messiah is here, all that stuff. So we have all that, and one of Judas's son, Manahen, did the same thing. Not exactly, but everyone calls it a triumphant processional into Jerusalem. He put on the purple garments, showing that he was royalty. He was all puffed up, acting like he was the king. He was trying to be the king, trying to take over the city. This happened around the year 66. So they both had both of these things. It was like ingrained in their DNA, you might say, right? But the number one thing that links them together is the idea of the messiahship. The messiahship could only come to you, the Messiah or being royalty, being king, it could only come to you if you were a son of David. Now, Jesus, according to the New Testament, he claimed to be the Messiah, and people said he was the son of David, right? So the New Testament says that about them. Josephus says that Judas, son of Hezekiah, claimed royalty. Right? When he took over in Sept, he claimed royalty, and his son, Manahen, also claimed royalty. So you have claimants to the throne in both families. So when you do the math on this, to try to see what are the odds that in this one town of Sept, you have two families with the same names, they're doing the same thing. When you do the odds on that, it's extremely high. It's like 99%, 99 point something percent. I just don't want to bother looking through it. So it tells you that they are the same family. And that tells you a lot about Jesus, right? Because that means somebody in that line. Let's put their names up there. Okay. So it was, we'll call him Judas of Sept, because that's the name I've used the most. Oops. And then there's James, Simon, Manahen, Jair. Anybody ever heard the word name Lazarus? Same name as Eliezer. Jair had a son named, I was just going to call him Lazarus because it's the same name, Lazarus. If you look up the New Testament, you'll find a guy named Jair who had a daughter who Jesus who brought him back to life. Right? If you look up the New Testament, you'll also find a guy named Lazarus who's brought back to life. So, this is more stuff we'll get into in the future, hopefully, if you come back. But these are the names of the people that were connected to Sept and look like they're connected somehow to Jesus. The most logical connection would be that because both groups thought that they had royalty in them, that they were the sons of David, so it's a DNA kind of thing. It's a thing that's passed down from father to son, and so it's one of these guys would be Jesus' father. Right? Now let's knock off the ones who we know weren't Jesus' father. So it wasn't Lazarus, because he was running the show at Masada. Right? When you read the story of Masada, the last people who died, Lazarus was the chief guy in charge of all that. It wasn't, and he would have been too old. You know, if he was Jesus' father, he would, by the year 73, when Masada fell, he would have to be like 93 years old to have Jesus born in the year 20. So it can't be this guy. And that same argument holds for Jair and Menahem. These guys are just too, they're not, let's see how to say that. They couldn't have been the father because they would have been the wrong age, right? So we're really down to these three guys, 1, 2, 3. So right there, if everything I've told you, if it's correct, right? And I made a mistake once or more in my life, so I could be wrong. But if it's correct, we have the names of Jesus' natural father sitting right there in front of us, right? Now we get to pick out which one, right? So there's only one of them that was in Nazareth area, in Sept, Nazareth, at the same time that Mary got pregnant. Right? The New Testament says Mary got pregnant and gave birth to Jesus when Herod was still the king. And the guy that was for sure in the area was this guy. So we'll give him a mark for that. There is only one, so this guy claimed, let's see, what else can I say about this? I had a list here. I might have to look at my notes on this one. Let's see. This guy named his sons James and Simon, right? James and Simon. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. So you know what I'm going to do is, I believe it was this guy right here, but I'm not following my notes, and I'm getting a little bit kind of lost here without my notes. So I'm just saying, I think it was this guy, and we'll probably wind it up there because the night's getting late. And if you want to read about Judas of Galilee and this Judas, son of Sepphoris, you could read about that in Josephus. Are there any questions? No. Wow. Brett.
What do we know about Paul? You were mentioning Paul earlier. Do you feel like we can get a sense of his personality from the New Testament?
Well, he said he was single. He encouraged people not to get married because of the world was going to change soon. He had a whole bunch of new ideas that didn't match what the Christians had been teaching. So, after that, that's about how I can go. Mark.
Yeah, so I heard you make the argument for Judas of Sepphoris as being Jesus' father, but I see now these would be Jesus' brothers, James and Simon, right?
Right.
And somehow Jesus is not on that list of his sons.
Right.
Why is that not?
So what looked like what happened was Judas of Sepphoris, he goes back to Sepphoris and hides his family. He hides these people. And to me, I think he gave his wife, if his wife was still alive, I think he gave her a letter of divorce. Because if she had the letter of divorce, and when the Romans came and talked to her, if they found out that she was the wife, she could prove, hey, I'm not even married to this guy anymore. I don't know where he is. Look, I have a letter of divorce, and I've actually married Joe down the street, whatever, So I think to save her life and his own and his children, I think he gave her a letter of divorce. And so what he did was then married Mary, as I think what happened. I think he married Mary, and then they had started a new family. Second family, he names the sons, the new sons, after the people he lost in his life. He lost Matthew. He named one of them Matthew, right? He lost James and Simon, had to go off into hiding. He named one James, one Simon. He himself, his name couldn't be used anymore. He could never tell anybody who he was, Judas, the son of Sepphoris. So he used that, so he named one of his sons Judas. So I think what happened was he just basically, He knew he could use those names and not get caught with his new family to remind him of his old family. And that's why you would end up with two families with the same names in two different locations. This group of people moved down to Capernaum. I'm probably saying that wrong. And you'll find Matthew with these people. He's in Capernaum, being the tax collector. That's where you'll find him. This guy, you'll find him in, he has his house there. Simon. This guy, I believe, is Simon Peter, you know. And then James would be the first James killed. It was killed by a sword. But anyway, these guys become fishermen to hide from the Romans, I think, right? So I don't really have time to bring all that out, but thanks for the question. Yeah, so thank you. Any other questions? Okay. So thanks so much for hearing me out. That was a lot of fun for me. It's been 33 years been working on this. And so I really appreciate it. So I would like to give you guys a chance, if you want to, if you would like to turn around and visit for a while, you're welcome to do that. There's also food in the back. We could stay here till 9, so we're going to be here for a while. So you could stay as long as you want, and I just really appreciate it. Oh, we're going to do this again in a month. It's going to be the second Wednesday of next month. It's October 9th. And if you'd like to come again, we'd love to have you. If you put your name on the list, I will not be doing flyers on telephone poles, so I won't be able to contact you there to remind you. So if you put your name on the list, we'll send off a notification. Yes? All right. So I'm going to finish up what I didn't finish up today. We're going to talk about his twin brother Thomas, his son Judas, who escaped to Edessa, and so we're going to talk about that. Clean up the part that I didn't really clean up too much. And then we want to have two other speakers. I'm looking at, there's a futurist, friend of mine. He said he would like to come. I've also talked to some other people who want to come. Let's see, the other subject was going to be the Dead Sea Scrolls. One person wants to come talk about that. And hopefully we can get Norm back to talk some more about his adventure, his mom's experiences. So, and also, if you would like to, I would love to have you, if you want to come and spend like five-minute talk here, that'd be awesome. So talk to me afterwards. I'll be around for a while. It'd be great to hear anything in history, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Tom?
Yeah, just you mentioned Thomas the twin. He also had another name, Didymus?
Yeah.
What was that?
So at that time in Semitic languages, there was no name Thomas. Thomas just meant twin. But in Greek, it meant there was a twin at that time was a real name. So twin was Didymus in Greek. And so, yeah, so.
Thomas and Didymus mean twin.
Yeah, they both mean twin. So when the Bible says it's Thomas Didymus, they're saying twin, in two different languages. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to let you guys visit with each other. And thanks so much for coming. It was really fun to have an audience to tell the story. Thank you. Thanks. Oh, thank you. Thanks. Wow. Man, doing all of that.